Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided.
This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Eagan community television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlaw Next and based in Eagan. Through Westlaw Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
Back with Access to Democracy. Alan Miller, your host, as usual, and Jim Carlson, your guest, as usual. Well, almost as usual. Jim has been here many times as both a friend, an expert, an engineer, interested in the infrastructure, a state senator, and now seeking to win back the seat that he lost in the election debacle of 2010, which turned the legislature on its head, to the impasse that we experienced this year, and really the disaster that was saved only by Governor Dayton. Is that a fair statement?
That's a good statement, yes. Yeah,
okay.
It's good.
Now you want to remind the people something about voting.
Yes, we are taping this on Friday, September 21st. And today is the first day that one can go vote in this fall's election. It's the same as voting on November 6th. If you go to City Hall in either Burnsville or Eagan from 8:30 in the morning or 8 o'clock in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon, there will be extended hours on the night before the election. They'll go till 5 o'clock. And in Eagan, there is actually a Saturday vote from 10 o'clock in the morning till 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the Saturday before the election.
And if you're not registered, you can
register
and
right
vote.
there. You can vote right there. It is just like going to the polls. Now, you do have to say why you're not going to be available on Election Day. But you know, that, for the most part, is fairly straightforward for people that have difficulty in transportation, or if they're disabled, or some other reason like that.
Or even work problems.
Or work, yes. Mm-hmm. Now, work, of course, is kind of a tough one because you're supposed to be able to be released from work to vote.
You should be.
So, yes, that is a law. Yeah. But
there are those
as of
people
today,
that, yeah.
As of today, you can go and vote. And
So-
when you go vote, of course, you should be armed with who to vote for. And of course, one of those in Burnsville and Eagan is probably going to be me.
Well, we certainly hope it's going to be you.
And then we should also remind people that you should vote no on both of the amendments, because one of the amendments, this might be the last absentee ballot that you can cast if the photo ID passes.
And what is your 96-year-old mother going to do if she has to go out and go get a photo ID?
I guess she'll just have to turn the clock back, because her photo ID shows her with, you know, she is 96, shows her with glasses, with black hair. She doesn't look at all like that anymore, but it is her photo ID. So when she brings it in next year, if this does pass, they could say that doesn't look like you and you can't vote.
And that's why we have to work not only for beating down that proposed amendment, but the other companion amendment, neither of which should be a constitutional amendment, one on gay marriage or one on photo ID. That's not what constitutions are really intended for.
That's correct.
Constitutions are intended for foundational things about structure and government, but not niche issues which the legislature tried to pass and were vetoed by the governor, so they made them constitutional amendments. One of the things you've got to do when you're reelected is to make it more difficult to bring a constitutional amendment.
I think that's a good idea. Yes, we can override the governor with a 2/3 majority. But a simple majority will get a constitutional ballot question onto the ballot, and they can be deceptive, which this one is.
And
these two
millions
are.
of dollars have been wasted and thousands of hours spent because of these two constitutional amendments from a Republican Party that talks about fiscal responsibility. Well, I don't know that we've seen fiscal responsibility in government. I don't know that we've certainly seen it in the amount of money that marital affairs are going to cost this government. There's going to be a bill that's going to come up when you're back in the Senate to pay almost $1 million in legal fees because Michael Broadcorp apparently had an affair with his boss, Senator Koch, and they want the people to pick up the tab for that? Absurd.
That's correct. And I can tell you, I really kind of reject making promises, and I don't sign pledges because it takes away your flexibility when there's a time when maybe you have to make a compromise. But that's one thing that I will promise is I won't vote to spend, I won't vote to spend one dime of public and taxpayer money to pay off that particular
illicit
issue,
affair.
that affair, and the money to go away or a secret settlement or any of that. That should be paid for by the people who were involved in the decisions and who were involved in that situation. It should not fall on the taxpayers
And
at
that's
all.
the Republican Party, which did a wonderful job with its own bookkeeping.
Oh, yes. Yes. I guess they are paying their rent now. They've caught up.
Now, one of the things we called a topic for today is ethics. And, well, in your campaign, as far as I can see, ethics have been lacking on the other side. Now, you're running against an incumbent opponent. He took your job. He is a darling of ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, that really malicious group that has caused trouble all over the country, that proposes legislation, even the two constitutional amendments that we face, that he helped get on the ballot as amendments.
ALEC is called, it's actually called in negative terms, a bill mill, because they've written 800 bills for legislators in states to introduce in their state legislatures. And primarily they are from, they're to reduce taxes on corporations, to kind of ensure their own perpetual power. And some corporations
sort of represent the 1% as opposed to the
Yeah.
good of the 99%.
And to be fair, ALEC started out as being a fairly innocent organization. They started out, and they still are, a 501c3. So the money that goes to them is actually tax deductible today. Now that's being challenged in the federal court. The organization called Common Cause has taken that challenge up. But when we had this big turnover of a lot of legislators and a lot of states to the Republicans, ALEC suddenly flexed their muscles. And they got a lot of
They were
these,
basically taken over by the notorious Koch brothers.
to some degree,
The
yes.
money of
Yeah,
the Koch brothers,
yes.
certainly.
A lot of it. And there are about now somewhere just under, I do have the list even with me, but I didn't count the number, of about 100 corporations that have severed their ties with ALEC, because ALEC has been so nasty in the bills that they've put out. And of course, to some degree, some of them are quite racist. The Shoot First bill that caused let's say, allowed the death in Florida.
Trayvon Martin case.
Trayvon Martin case. That was an ALEC bill. And the African American community said, you want our business, but then you're going to pass laws that kill our young people. And the first ones that jumped out of ALEC then were Coca-Cola and Pepsi. And then since then, we've even had Walmart and several other large national
I think
corporations
Target
sever
is
their
out,
ties.
et cetera. Your opponent, of course, is not only an ALEC member, but I understand that he was wined and dined at their annual convention. I don't know that to be a fact, but it certainly came to me on good information.
I don't know that personally, but
it's troublesome, and he supported their legislation.
he's on their
which is,
transportation committee.
yeah.
Yes.
Well, what bothered me about Ted Daly is there's a piece of literature here that says Jim Carlson is a job crusher, which is so offensive to me. Governor Dayton proposed a bill, a bonding bill, that would have created thousands of jobs. It was really pared down so substantially by the Republican legislature and supported by Daley that there are thousands of jobs that additional jobs could have been created on a bonding bill when interest rates are as low as they have ever been, and we could have repaired the infrastructure so desperately needed in this state, and he voted against it.
That's correct. Now, it's kind of an odd position here where one of the first literature pieces against me in 2010 was that I voted for the bonding bill, voted for bus rapid transit, all of that sort of thing. And then when Senator Daley was in the legislature, what bills did he sponsor? The bus rapid transit, the same ones I did. So there's a little bit of hypocrisy there, but then also, like you say,
there's a lot of hypocrisy there.
Yeah, like you say, the government is responsible for government infrastructure, and it is deteriorating. We all know about the bridges, we all know about the potholes, all of that sort of thing, but a stimulus, which, for instance, the president signed on February 17th of 2009, brought a lot of jobs to this country, and it helped return some of the prosperity a bit. Now, many people say that it wasn't large enough, other people say it was too large, but it is the government investing on government infrastructure, roads, bridges, things that we all use, but we all can't pay for individually. And in the state of Minnesota, the bonding bill is something that where we go out and borrow for 20 years against the future prosperity.
And it's something that has been bipartisan in years past.
For years, yes. Mm-hmm.
Until this Republican legislature got in and made everything partisan.
Yes.
They tried to thwart everything that Governor Dayton proposed, and the result was it's been known as the do-nothing legislature. Well, Ted Daly was one of the prominent people in the do-nothing legislature, and I've invited him here to talk about his stand. I've invited him here to debate you. The fact of the matter is he won't talk about his votes. He won't talk about the organizations that he's a member of. He won't debate you, but instead they put out scurrilous pieces of literature here that are completely false, such as you as a job killer, and they're making really phone calls that are outrageous, and let's talk to those.
Well, let's just 1 second go back to the job creator. I'm an engineer. I have been in technology and working for private companies for more than 30 years as an engineer, 2 major Fortune 500 companies. I have been involved in creating or let's say putting together jobs around the world. When I was in international manufacturing, it was primarily Asia Pacific. Before that, it was Europe. It was here in the U.S., Oklahoma, Wapata, North Dakota, Hutchinson, Minnesota, and Camarillo, California. I know what it takes to put together a job. The job creators are not the wealthy. The job creators are the people that take their hard-earned money and put it on the line and buy something. They bought diskettes, they bought videotape, they bought 3M products that I worked on. That's creating jobs. I really have to say that I'm very irritated that someone would go and work at a company for only 9 months and then think he understands how to create jobs. 9 months does not make a person who understands how to create jobs.
We've got to talk a little bit about Daly's background, because basically he was in the service, and then he was unemployed for a while. He is, I think, an accountant, but in this 9 months, there was this corporation in Burnsville that, at least his literature at one point said he was the chief financial officer and managing partner or general manager of.
Yeah.
This corporation had salespeople, but it didn't have any employees. So a total of 9 people, including secretaries, administrative staff, janitors.
I don't know all the details about that at this point, so it's really not really fair for me to do too much commenting on it. But it still is. What I say is that at 3M, we had meetings that lasted for 9 months. This is not the kind of thing where you go in and learn about creating jobs, about being in business, when you're not even in there for a full fiscal cycle.
Now, you favored the homestead exemption.
Yes.
What did this legislature and Ted Daly do to the homestead exemption?
Well, the homestead exemption is gone. Now we have a market value exemption, which replaced the homestead exemption, and it's a very complicated formula that determines who and how much you get exempted from the market value of your home. Primarily, it's going to shift the, let's say, the cost of government, the cost of local government, onto the people who do not own their homes, or onto in some cases, the people that have the wealthier homes, and corporations and business. Now, business has not felt it yet, because what happens is that you have corporate, or let's say commercial industrial property, and you have residential property. Residential property, background a little bit on our real estate taxes, they're levied with an amount of money, and you pay a proportion of that. And when the residential property values go down, the proportion that's paid for by commercial industrial goes up. And it usually takes about 3 years for those things to level out. So what's going to happen now is commercial industrial is going to go up. Rental property and non-owned property
is going to go up.
Yes.
And owned property is still, because the county had to raise taxes, is still going to be more expensive.
Yes. In some cases,
there's a lot of things we have to cover here, and I got to get to it.
And just one more thing. In Greater Minnesota, the effect is far greater than it is in the metro area.
One of the things that Daly says is he brought a $6 billion budget down to $2 billion, and now the state has a $1 billion surplus. This was done by he and his fellow Republican legislators. As far as I can see, the surplus is based on an approximation of what's going to come in.
That's a forecast, yes.
Right, a forecast. And what's left out of that equation is the fact that to bring the deficit down, they took money that the schools was entitled to and took it away from the schools. It still has to be paid back. In the meantime, the schools have had to go out and borrow money to meet their obligations, and we're talking about billions of dollars, and they put that in. So you're taking money away that you owe the schools and putting it into to bring down a deficit. That's really false accounting, and this man is an accountant.
Well, I can't blame it all on Senator Daly, because he does what they tell him to do. He votes the way they ask him, the caucus, to vote. But the fact of them is, what you're saying is correct. The $6 billion deficit was from November of 2010. That was the November forecast. It was actually a number that was put together before the election. By February of 2011, that had already gone down to $5.2 billion. This is the number that we had.
Some of that is because the federal government gave us some money. We don't talk about the fact that the federal government and the Obama administration gave us a lot of money.
Yes, that's right. Well, in the forecast, that was already included, but the change in economics was something that happened. And what people don't realize is that when, let's say, President Obama came in, the Dow was at 7,900 something.
It was at 6,000 something.
And that's when it hit bottom.
It's now at 13,600.
Yes.
More than doubled since he's in.
everyone needs to know what happens when the Dow goes up. People are trading stocks. And what happens when you trade stocks? You pay taxes on them. And when you have realized an income, you also go out and spend some of it. So what's happened is a lot of people have been spending income that came from stocks, and you pay sales tax on that. A lot of people have been realizing income that came from stocks. You pay income tax on that. There's a lot of your pensions that have gone up. Now, a lot of pensions that were considered underfunded in the past are now funded because of the Dow going up. This affects every person in the country. Maybe not directly if you don't own stock, but indirectly if you do have a pension, if you have a 401k, if you have something else that involves stocks. They have gone up. So we always have to look at that. That's where a lot of this, the river of the economy got wider, and the income of the state just taps off a little bit of that. So that's where a lot of this had come from. Nothing came from the Minnesota legislature policies that affected Minnesota's
This last
budget.
session, which is, as I said, has been known as the do-nothing legislator,
That's right,
and
yeah.
I didn't coin that term. It's been coined over and over by media and by others. Now, let's talk about these nefarious phone calls and push polling and fake numbers on phones and really false information that voters are getting when they pick up their phones.
Well, as you
Which
know,
is not coming from the Democratic Party, which abhors that type of conduct.
as far as I know, and if anybody gets those kinds of calls from the Democrats, I hope that they call me and tell me that they've gotten them, because I don't like that. Within a half hour before I came to the show, I did get a call, and the person had a number on it, and I wanted to check that number, the caller ID number, to make sure that it was live, and I did hit dial back, and it indeed was live.
But that
it
was
it was a survey.
That was a Minnesota organization.
Yeah.
We're talking about these that are coming, that are hired by the Republican Party to make these calls, and I know that you have been the victim of some
The push
of them.
polling was, there were at least 4 companies that were hired. One from Utah, one from Aspen, Colorado, one from Houston, Texas, and one from New York. And what they do is they call under the auspices of doing a survey, and then they go down the ballot and ask if you first of all, if you plan on voting, and then which way you vote. And every answer they say, oh, thank you, that's very, very good, until they got to the local races. And then if you said that you were going to vote for Jim Carlson, they would come back and say, would that vote be affected if you found out that Jim Carlson voted to release sex offenders into your neighborhood where they can reoffend?
And of course, that's totally malicious and untrue.
Well, okay, it's not untrue. You got to remember that they say if you found out.
If you found out.
So that's why it's called push polling. It's to set in your mind a false premise, and it's also to test what how long will you hold on to voting for Jim Carlson before I tell you all kinds of rotten things that he might have done before you abandon him. That's one. The second one was a set of calls that came on Saturday, August 25th. They came out of a group that said that they were calling on behalf of the Coalition of Minnesota Business, and they were reminding everyone that Ted Daly's being unfairly attacked by special interest groups on his education votes, and call up Ted Daly and thank him. And then they gave a number. Well, interestingly, on the caller ID, it had the Minnesota Senate number.
For Ted Daly's office.
Ted Daly's office, which means that it was being done by the phones in the Capitol, in Ted Daly's office, or somebody was faking the number. Now, I don't know which answer that is, but we have talked with the Attorney General about it. If it's being done in Ted Daly's office, that's highly illegal. And if it's done by spoofing a number, they call that spoofing, putting a fake number on there. That also has some ramifications legally. The FCC and FTC has jurisdiction over that. The Attorney General has actually asked us to file a complaint.
And I think that there are actually investigations ongoing about those practices.
Absolutely, and I can tell you there again that that'll be one bill that will be fun to drop, is that you cannot spoof any number that you don't own. So any number that shows up on your caller ID, and the law already states that that number that shows up on caller ID has to be a valid number, because you're supposed to be allowed to hit return dial and tell the person that answers the phone that you don't want to be put on you want to be taken off of a call list. And that's even for politicians. So that number has to be realistic, but it also should be a number that the caller actually owns.
Well, that number has not been realistic, and we don't have that much time left. We talked about Ted Daly's affiliations, which is all with right-wing groups such as ALEC, and the fact that he doesn't cross the party line. He votes the way the party says, and he sponsors bills which either they suggest or that he sponsor, or that someone else sponsors that he's told to vote. I don't think there's one instance we can point to where Daley did not vote the party line. I'm not aware of it, let's put it that way. But and he's supporting Romney for president. Very, very vociferous in that. Maybe not this week, but after Romney has put his foot in his mouth so much.
Well, one thing I want to be sure though is that I don't want to attack Ted personally. He's a gentleman. He's a gentleman.
You haven't, but I'm just talking about his record.
Yeah.
And his record is what attacks him. He is a nice guy, and as I said, I have invited him time and again. I even went to his office, one of his confabs, and invited him again. And of course, I've never even had the courtesy to get back to me on that.
Well, that's part of representation here. Is that I think when you represent a district, if you look at my literature, you have my home address on there, you have my home phone on there, you have an email on there. It's not something that I don't use a drop box. I don't use a drop telephone. I use my phone. So when people want to call up and tell me either that they like me or don't, they have a direct way to do it.
And they do. And when you served, you burned the night light. You were probably the hardest working legislator in the Capitol. Yours was the last light to go out. And now Jim Carlson is running again for the Senate in District 51. Needless to say, I am prejudiced in his behalf. There's no question about that. I'm upfront about that. Not only because he's a friend, but because he is the most scrupulously honest legislator who I have ever met. And he wants to remind you once again, when we only have a few seconds left, so Jim, thank you for coming in, that you can vote now.
Yes.
And really vote. Make sure you get out there, register and vote. Good luck, Jim Carlson.
Register and vote.
On
Thank you.
November 6th.
Thank you, Al.